Hello again, everybody. How's it going?
What's up?
Cool. So, October is almost over. Halloween is tomorrow. So,
Yep.
we thought we'd fit in one more horror film for you guys. And so, we're going with another kind of classic film, Pan's Labyrinth.
It's become a classic. Yeah, modern classic.
Yeah. Because this came out, 2006? So, It's getting up there in age, but it's, this is definitely relatively,
Never.
I know, right?
Never. This movie is perfect. It is flawless.
This movie's amazing. This is definitely like Guillermo's a guy, like his early career is kind of interesting. Like he did a lot of stuff and sort of in and out of Hollywood. He had some bad experiences with, like, I think it was the Weinstein brothers. They recut one of his films. That pissed him off. This film, he had a lot of difficulties getting made, a lot of difficulties. But it is like, I feel almost perfectly encapsulates his themes and his style as a filmmaker.
Absolutely. It is definitely one of his signature pieces. I feel like he's got 3/4 of those. He's got the 3 Spanish-speaking films that he got made: Kronos, Devil's Backbone, and this movie. And then possibly Shape of Water fits. Like, it has a lot of the same kind of artistic themes and things like that. But this is definitely like Guillermo's signature piece. We talked a little bit about, like, at the end of last week's review about how, like, some directors working within the studio system will do like a one for you, one for me kind of a thing. Guillermo was caught up, like, he did one for Miramax for the Weinsteins. That didn't work out. Then, he did Blade, so he's working within the studio, and then he got to make Devil's Backbone. Then he got to make Hellboy, one for the studios and one for him, but he got to kind of finesse that deal. And then finally, this is the one where he got to make his. This is just like purely out of his imagination, which I love, which is really just based on a guy who reads a lot of books. He just reads a lot of fucking books and fairy tales and whatever.
Yeah, I was watching because you kept talking about some of the special features for Blade 2. I watched part of one of them. It was like his director's notebook. And just like he has books and books and books of his own drawings that he creates for ideas for characters. And they're all in that film. He talked a lot about how he was really interested in anatomy of creatures, of fantasy creatures, and he had drawn a book on. In Blade 2, there's these like hybrid vampire something else creatures.
Yes, I remember. Yeah. The Daywalker.
Yeah, they're these weird Daywalker people. They become sort of the antagonists because they feed on vampires. And he had all these drawings of like what the mouth looked like, what the stinger in the mouth looked like. And he's all written in Spanish, like describing. So it's very interesting.
And with like the mechanics of it, like the physical mechanics of like how this thing works and like why he's got a tongue that shoots out of his mouth or whatever, like really, really in depth. And he did the same thing. Well, he does this for all of his movies. So consider a guy that directs big budget movies like Blade 2, which for a lot of people are just dumb throwaway popcorn stuff, especially in that era. Consider the amount of detail that he workshops into these things. And then he gets to this point where he gets to unleash all of that into like an original story that he wrote. Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. And, again, this is another film, like, just talking about like how crazy it is for these films even to get made. This film, he said that the budget fell through on this multiple times, at least twice. And he was struggling to get it made, and they were thinking about cutting the budget, and he was thinking about how can he cut certain shots and certain other things in the film so that he can actually get it made. Basically, it didn't totally get made until Alfonso Cuarón kind of came in with him and said, I'll basically fund like half the film, half of the whatever the budget, the development budget, so we can get this made. And he ended up having to do a co-production with Spain, which was not exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to do it in Mexico.
Right?
Yeah. In Mexico, you use Mexican talent and Mexican,
everything
everything. But doing it in Spain was another way that allowed him to, get more funding or whatever.
Well, I think
Yeah.
he was set on his cast, was he not, or did he want to cast Mexican actors or Spanish actors? 'Cause I feel like the kind of had to cast Spanish actors.
Well, you have to when if you do a co-production, but like if you did it in Mexico, you could have hired Mexican actors or whoever. I guess he had an idea for before then.
He like for this movie, he's got a lot of like in Spain, like a couple big name actors that were big over there at the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the acting is pretty good. I mean, one other interesting thing from the commentary track was he basically said that he cast a lot of people against type. So like the guy who plays the villain is sort of against type. The guy
he does that a lot.
Yeah, the who plays the doctor is usually a comedic actor. So there's a lot of none of I don't think any American would think like, oh, this person's wrong for the role. They all
oh my god, no, they fit so great. Yeah, well, he does that actually. That's reminding me of he did that with the other two movies, Kronos and Devil's Backbone, of the Mexican, Argentinian, Spanish, whatever Spanish speaking actors that he cast. He would do that a lot. He would pick someone who was like big in theater or big in this, and then he would have them play like a drunkard or something.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Yeah. So so that's like the background of this film. And this film was definitely like when it came out, it got a lot of hype. I mean, it got talked about a lot,
which is great.
Yeah.
I'm glad, because so often you hear about movies that come out that are underappreciated, like a Blade Runner or something, and then later people are still talking about it. This one hit right off the bat, and it's still hitting, and that makes me happy because it's good.
Yeah. It would be quite a shame if like something like this kind of got put to the wayside because it's in Spanish or it was made in another country. But yeah, this film, I don't know if it got any Oscar consideration. I didn't check that.
It won 3 Oscars and was nominated for 6. Yeah.
What did it win? Like makeup,
cinematography, makeup, and art direction. And it was also nominated for Best Original Screenplay, music, so score, and foreign language film of the year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's
really good. It is
really
fucking good.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, like, yeah, this film like blew up right away, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And you're right though, for like a Spanish speaking or like a foreign language, because in America, if it's not English, it's foreign language. And what I mean by that is that it gets this label put on it that it's just like something else that it's like not necessarily worth considering along the side of the whatever Hollywood puts out that year. And this is a recent conversation that was had like last year with Parasite, where finally another best foreign language film made it through to like the regular Oscars. Right. Yeah. So it's interesting that this got this. There's a couple of these that break through, but this one broke out all the way back in 2006. Yeah.
This is sort of. I mean, can you think of any others like before this?
No, I mean not off the top of my head. I'm sure there's examples, but not like this. Yeah, and especially for Guillermo Navarro to come out and win Best Cinematography, that's hype.
That is
because he is so good. Having seen all of Guillermo's films, so good.
Yeah. So yeah, this film, there's a lot of. It was talked about a lot. Again, it's probably like considered his best film. And it's just right in his wheelhouse of the type of milieu he likes to live in.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So getting into the plot. So like the film, it opens up. It's like Spain in 1944, and it starts to see this girl Ophelia. She's like bleeding, and the blood is going. It's like it's like inversion or something.
Yeah.
It's like reversing into her, and then we get this fairy tale thing. It's really interesting too because he talked about the opening of the film was very hard for him to figure out. He said he rewrote it many times, and he had written different iterations of it. But the idea of seeing, because he talked about like, for him, he said like the film is about. He said that this is not the story of a girl dying, but a girl giving birth to herself the way she wanted to be. So for him, this whole story, it's about choices and stuff like that, and like people at a crossroads.
Well, that's like an optimistic fairy tale way to describe that, right? A girl giving birth to herself as she would like to be. Considering where this is set, 1944 Spain, the fascist regime, the Franco fascist regime has taken hold. there's nowhere else but to escape into like a fantasy world for like a child in this world, right?
Yeah, or even for anyone really.
That's true. That's true.
This whole he doesn't get too much into the context of what happens historically, because this is sort of like a upbeat moment.
Yeah,
but the Spain had basically kind of got abandoned, and they lived under the Franco regime until I don't know when, like the 60s or something like that.
60s or 70s, like really a long time.
Yeah, until people basically overthrew him. And funny, my girlfriend, she's Portuguese, and Portugal had the exact same thing happen. It was a different person, but basically they had a fascist regime that was there until the 60s or 70s, when there was an open revolt that overthrew it. And yeah, I mean, again, like this full film, it's about people at a crossroads and trying to escape these kind of like trying to find a way where you can recreate yourself in a different image, but they're all sort of trapped in this world, right? Where there's this brutality and these horrors, of the real world.
And it is interesting to note the parallels between this one and The Devil's Backbone, because The Devil's Backbone takes place, I believe, in this is all from memory, but I believe in the 30s. So it's still taking place in Spain in the 30s, and there's also, a fascist regime building up, and the only difference is that film focuses on the story of like basically one boy, but it's like a group of boys. It's like 2 or 3 boys, 3 or 4 actually, but it's like really like it's like from the boys' perspective, and that's the 1930s, and this is more from like a girl's perspective in the 1940s. But it's all set in the same, like you said, the same milieu. It's the same. The backdrop is oppressive World War II / fascist regime stuff, and then how do the kids discover or wander upon this like fantastical thing that's happening.
Yeah. In the commentary, he described Devil's Backbone like the backdrop was a proto-fascist type of government. Like he said, like they don't have the intellectual way of articulating what they're trying to build, but that's what it is. And in this film, the antagonist, this Vidal character, he's a fully articulated sort of intellectual fascistic type of person who's very meticulous, and he's like super obsessed with small details. And he actually described him as someone who's very detail oriented, but he sort of loses sight of the bigger picture of the world, which is kind of his downfall.
Well, he's obsessed with clocks in this, right?
Yeah, well,
he's like fixing clocks or whatever.
There's also like these other scenes where he's like talking about like how the movements of the rebels on a map, and how he sees all of these. He doesn't really take them seriously because he doesn't understand them. He just sees them as small. He doesn't see that it's like there's an actual resistance. He doesn't get that, and so he just sees them as a small like pieces moving around on a chessboard that he can defeat through tactics. Right. The watch sort of represents his past that he sort of that he has to live up to. Because, the watch was like, this watch was broken, and his dad supposedly broke it at the precise moment that he died.
That's what it was, yeah. Because I remember going through this film, like I've said it before we started recording, I've seen this film many times. But one of the times, I remember getting really into the symbolism of the clocks and the gears and like everything about Vidal and like his character. And like a lot of that stuff I don't remember. That was more during my like super like film scholarly type days. But I remember being really into that, and I thought it was really cool how there's always some kind of motif playing in the background for these characters. Everybody has like a thing. All of his characters usually do. Yeah.
There is. And there's like a lot of the architecture sort of informs what's going on.
And he's been doing that shit since the very first movie, since Kronos. It's a movie about it's technically about a vampire. And so every single set, every single location in that movie's got some kind of gothic architecture, got some kind of gargoyles, some kind of fucking blood in the stone, and like all these crazy things.
Yeah.
So like he's really, really detailed about that.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. And there's the opening. We see her dying, but going in reverse, and then we get told this sort of fairy tale story about this the princess from the underground realm who decided to leave because she was dreaming of the human world, and she escapes, and then she forgets who she was because she sees the light. And it's sort of juxtaposing that maybe this person's Ophelia, right? The main character. And then the normal story opens up, and it's Ophelia and her mother arriving in Spain, and her mother's like sick.
Sick
and
she's pregnant.
Yeah, sick and pregnant with a child, a son. And yeah, they arrive, and then Ophelia, she's very curious, and she
well, they arrive at this guy. So Vidal is going to be the step dad, basically.
Yes,
of Ophelia.
Of Ophelia,
and, I don't know if I don't remember if they say if they've met before or anything, but I think it's the first time meeting him, right?
He feels very cold to her.
He's very
from
cold.
The jump.
He's just excited that he's got a woman pregnant with a boy that's going to take over, generationally take over his.
Yes,
because his dad was, like you mentioned, his dad was like this legendary general. They died in battle that was like known for that, and he's respected for that. And so he wants to kind of build up the next generation and kind of carry that legacy forward. Yeah,
yeah, pass on the legacy. Yeah, and so when Ophelia arrives, she I don't know, she fits in this like puzzle piece or something that's on this sculpture, and then she sees the fairy for the first time. But the fairy is sort of takes the shape of like some kind of a bug.
It's like a giant praying mantis almost. Yeah,
it does look like a praying mantis. Yeah. Like a giant praying mantis. It doesn't have like the little stabby the stabby arms. I forget what you call that, but it does look like a giant praying mantis. But this is the fairy of the story. She meets Vidal, and their first interaction's very awkward. She hands her left hand to him, and he crushes her hand. He's like, "That's the wrong hand. It's the other hand." And so it's like, okay, and then the fairy. Ophelia sees the fairy again at this campsite, and then it takes her. She follows it to the labyrinth, and then that's another thing that's going to come up later.
The labyrinth of the fawn.
It's almost like that's what this movie's about. Yeah. And then she also meets Mercedes there, who's
Mercedes is kind of like, this is just a dumb old labyrinth, don't worry about it, kind of a thing.
Yeah. The adults, they have no idea. Right?
They don't care. Yeah, it's rocks. It's architecture that was there. The adults are worrying about there's a rebel offensive mounting in the forest. They're worried about other things. They're worried about Vidal, not killing them or having them be killed. And Ophelia's over here just like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, I remember being 12 years old. Like, I would like to play around in a place like that.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. And again, there's the other thing too is there's these two stories. There's the A story, which is the Ophelia fantasy, dark fantasy stuff. And the B story is this rebellion against the fascists and, this guy Vidal, and basically the fact that there's all these rebels around him that he doesn't know and how he's reacting to that. And then the two stories slowly kind of meet together. And so, then at night, there's this scene, this really brutal scene where the soldiers, they find these people who are out in the woods and they say, they say they were hunting for rabbits, but we think they're lying. And he comes out, Vidal comes out, and he's like, take off your hat. How dare you wear your hat in front of me?
Yeah.
And the guy takes off his hat, and they're basically begging. And he hands him, I don't know, it was like a bottle of beer or some shit like that or whatever. He just beats them in the head with the beer bottle and then shoots them in the head. And he shoots the old man in the head too. It is brutal, man.
They're like a couple farmers that he thought were harboring refugees or something, and it turns out that they were not. But whatever, that's just there's plotty stuff. But the way that he bashes the guy's skull, it's the first act of violence in the film, I think. But the way that it's really brutal, and it's not glossed up in any way. He just beats this guy's face in until he's dead. I thought it was just a really well done scene.
It's violent. It's violent. And he, again, in the commentary track, he talks about a lot of these things were first-hand accounts that he read of different time periods. And so that was one he read. Well, he said there was a story of a guy who he was in a shopping center or something, and he was getting groceries, and the guy was wearing a hat or whatever, and then some fascist guy came up to him and was like, "Why are you wearing a hat? How dare you do that? That's disrespectful." And the guy bashed him in the head with with the butt of his gun.
The butt of his gun, yeah.
And then took his groceries and just left.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, sort of an adapted version of things that have happened at different points in history. This is a very brutal scene, and it shows you this dude is like, and so then we see like they look through the guy's bag and they do find some dead rabbits, and he's like, well, you should probably search them better next time so I don't have to do this. But he has no remorse for killing them. He's more like, you wasted my time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Which is great because it's so easy for a character like Vidal, who is just so cut and dry evil. It's like, how many movies have you seen where like it opens up and one of the first scenes with the bad guys is the bad guy just kills innocent people for no reason or whatever. That's just like a classic thing. But the way that it's done and the way that they emphasize it, like he cares more about his time not being wasted than, actually doing this in the first place. It just builds more on his character. And I'm glad that they built his character, that he's not just like a villain, that he's got all the proper motivations and everything. I mean, he is a little bit of a caricature, but he's not just a caricature, which is cool.
That's something Guillermo talked about. Another thing in the commentary track was like he felt like there's a tension between, like, because he sees the Vidal character sort of later on transforming into like sort of the way he described it was like the big bad wolf kind of character. He's this relentless guy who's trying to achieve this thing for whatever his reasons are. And the reason is basically he feels like he has to live up to these things that his dad did. But he felt like in a fairy tale kind of story, you need to have characters that are sort of a caricature because it sort of serves this purpose of having it be a fairy tale, right? And if you get bogged down in sort of some of these other things outside of just saying, okay, this person is evil because of this, you kind of get away from the fairy tale aspect that he wanted to highlight.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a lot of why, again, he is a bit of a caricature, but it's serving the thematic elements of the film pretty much.
Yeah.
So then later on, Ophelia, she meets with like the fairy again, and the fairy sort of leads her to the center of the labyrinth where she meets the faun for the first time. And the faun is like one of the coolest, right? Oh, yeah. Like one of the coolest like practical effects things that you've ever that's ever been done. It's just so cool. It's just so cool. Like the whole get up and like the fact that Jug Jones is like doing like the way he like does that form of acting. It's amazing.
It's the way he like contorts himself, and he moves like he's creaky and he's old, but he's like an object instead of a person or something. It's really cool, and it's funny that I think I remember going through the materials, like he was trying to find a Spanish or like a Mexican actor to play that role, and ultimately he went back to Doug Jones, who had been doing this kind of stuff for him before. He did this for him in Hellboy, so he's just like I believe he was the only like American on the entire production was Doug Jones. Yeah,
he's great. I mean, all these roles, every single one of them, he's always great. And he plays another character in this. But yeah, it's good that you bring up the fact that he acts really old in this, because like what's interesting is you'll see
the thing,
the faun kind of reverses chronology. Like he starts old and then gets younger when we see him later in the film, which is interesting. The other thing too was like, so apparently like the way that they built the suit was like the person who's puppeting this thing could control the legs too. So he's puppeting his own legs while also doing all the hand movements. So it's a really interesting, intricate whole puppet, as it were.
And they did something to his mouth, right? Like the mouth is animated, I believe. Like they've got pieces in the costume. Like he opens his mouth and he speaks and stuff, but like it's like accentuated in a way by the costume, without CGI or anything, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, usually they have different inflection points where it's like someone controls this or someone controls the eyes, right?
Yeah.
And it just, someone's doing the stuff with the hands. Yeah, it's so like you can have more articulation in the puppetry.
Yeah. There's a bunch of B-roll of Doug Jones learning and saying his lines in Spanish in these scenes, because he was acting opposite the actors in the scenes where he was the fawn. And it's funny because he's got such a heavy American accent. He's never spoke a day of Spanish in his life before he did this movie.
Yeah.
But he absolutely, like, he sells it. Like, the costume sells it. All of it together is just they really did a good job. Of course, they overdubbed his voice with another actor, but
yeah. But yeah, it's so like this is why these films are so cool, right? Like there another version of this, like if it was done by someone else, it would just be a CGI thing.
100%, and it would be 2000 CGI, and it would look weird and horrible.
It would look weird. Yeah, it would look weird. It wouldn't have the same feel. Yeah, and it would just lose that magic. But this, like when you first see him, because like at first he's like kind of there, and he's almost like a tree.
He's part of the he's part of the labyrinth. He's literally decayed. He's like formed into the labyrinth at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he like creeps out. He's like, "Oh, hello."
Yeah, like he's so excited. Like, a human child, nice.
Yeah, human child, nice, exactly, nice. Yeah. Oh well, let me show you this book and have you do things, and then send you off on your way. I think he calls her the princess. He calls her Princess Moana in this, and she's like, "What? I'm not a princess." He's like, "No, you are. You're the daughter of the king, and you have to do these 3 things, and then you'll be brought back to the underworld where you're the princess. But you have to pass all 3 of these tests. Blah blah blah." And then he gives her this book. It's like the Book of Crossroads, which is blank. And so she's kind of confused. Yeah. But yeah, later on when she like is actually doing the tasks, it'll appear.
It fills itself in, magically.
Yeah. So that's basically now this is her journey, is to do these 3 tasks so that she can go back to the underworld.
Yeah, because I mean, fuck the real world, so... Yeah,
fuck the real for real. Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, I would take that over her. Her future would probably not be great.
Not great at all.
Even if she lived, right?
No.
Okay, so then later on, so she's like starts to do her first task, and there's all this other stuff like her mom is like getting her ready for this. I don't know. There's a dinner or some kind of crap like that, like where they're gonna meet with Vidal, and they give her this dress and these shoes and all this other.
Yeah, there's like a whole dinner scene with all those people, right? I think that was actually earlier, but yeah.
Yeah, and so then she's got this dress and she's gonna do this thing, but then she's like, oh, I have to take these 3 stones to this toad in a tree.
Oh yeah.
So she runs off to do that, and she gets to this place where it's like really soggy and muddy. And so she takes off her dress and she's going into this tree.
She goes into the tree, yeah.
Into the tree to feed this toad. So she goes into the tree and it's gross. This is pretty gross, right? It's like there's all these bugs and it's like hella muddy and
I love this stuff. Yeah, this is like the first time I saw this movie, I think I was in high school. Like this was my favorite scene in the whole movie because the grosser it is equals to my, ape brain is the cooler it is.
Yeah, it's super gross. And then, she meets this toad thing, and it's like burps in her face. It's just, it's super gross.
It's very funny. It's very cool.
Yeah. But then she like feeds the things, the stones she had turn into bugs, and then she feeds the bugs to the toad, and the toad like dies or something, or like
the toad like it like vomits itself inside out. So it literally like births itself through its own mouth in this like gelatinous blob, and then of like whatever it is, and then that inside that like homunculus is the key.
Yeah. So all that so that she could get a key out of this toad's stomach, basically. So she gets the key, and now she's done the first task. Now she like has this key, and basically she succeeded in the first thing and has to go on to the next one. But then she gets home, and then like there's again now it's like the things are kind of bleeding into each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth between the she's got her missions in the fantasy world, and then there's all the stuff happening in the real world. Yeah,
and then in the real world, there's like all this stuff with Mercedes and the doctor. So the doctor and Mercedes are working with the rebels.
They're colluding.
With the rebels, and so the doctor's like giving antibiotics that are going to the rebels so that they can,
which were rationed, I believe. The antibiotics were like rare, so there had to be like a set number of them or whatever. So he kind of has to like walk this fine line of like, sneaking some back and forth between the two camps, because he's trying to maintain his cover because he's also the doctor that's treating Vidal's Ophelia's mother, basically.
Yes.
Through the birth. So he's got to play both sides.
Yeah, so he's playing both sides, and as is Ophelia too. Like there's, again, there's all these scenes at the beginning where they kind of it's clued in without having to say any dialogue. Like she comes in and she's like brought some food for them, and Vidal is going over the map of all the movements of the rebels.
Mercedes.
Yeah, and so she's like looking at the map and shit, like really kind of peering in and listening. And we were like, oh, okay, yeah, she's trying to furry information. And it's, obviously the game that's been played is like, who knows what, right? Like we got this idea that Ophelia is giving information, but does Vidal know? And we're kind of uncertain at first.
Mercedes, correct? Not Ophelia.
Yeah. Mercedes, my bad.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just making sure.
Yeah. Ophelia doesn't care about any of this.
Yeah, she's not involved at all.
She's trying to save her mom, as we'll see later, and she's trying to do what the Fawn is telling her to do.
Yeah.
So she has no care about what's going on, or who wins or who dies or whatever. So then Ophelia is like running at. So like. We see Mercedes giving a signal to the rebels in the trees. And then Ophelia shows up, and she's like all dirty, and she had just gotten the key and done her thing. And then she like takes her in, is like, oh, your daughter, we found her. She was out in the woods all day.
Right.
Whatever. Yeah. That's what Mercedes tells the mom.
It's a good cover.
Yeah. And then she, again, we get this more stuff of like Ophelia. She's like taking a bath, and she's like, talking to her mom, and her mom's like sort of, her mom's also kind of like right in the middle, right? Like the mom doesn't want, like the mom, she kind of gets the big picture of like, okay, we're in this world where there's this fascist regime, and I'm doing whatever I can to protect you. But she also, I don't know. She wants to let Ophelia kind of be a child, but also kind of doesn't want her to be in this fantasy world. The mom is basically just a mom, really. She's trying to, again, find this balance between, letting her kid be a kid, but then also kind of, because when she gets too far, she's trying to bring her back in and say like, no, there are consequences. This man is insane. But this is kind of the best case for us, is to be here, to be with him, to give him the son or whatever. Like, she doesn't say all these things, but that's kind of like the way that she plays it. Is she's like, you need to stop with all your fantasy shit, because sometimes there's real things that are happening. But, she's just trying to like ease her into this new life that is going to affect both of them. Yeah. And you can see later we get this stuff where Vidal like hates all the fantasy stuff. Like he hates that Ophelia's reading these books that have to do with the fairy tales and stuff. He hates that stuff. He's a very, I don't know, pragmatic kind of guy.
He's very exactly, yeah.
And so again, that's another tension like that's happening between these two stories. But yeah, so then all this happens, and then Ophelia, she has the key, right? So then she goes back to the labyrinth, and she's just like, the Fawn's like, oh, good for you, blah blah blah, and like now you have to do the next thing, and he gives her this piece of chalk, and it's like, oh, you have to draw this doorway so you can go.
Yeah, you draw like a trap door, and then you'll go into the what's his name, the Pale Man. You'll go into his like a lair, and her goal is to like what extract some
She has to
fairies or something.
She uses the key to get something, and then she has to like use the key to open a door to get something, and then also take some of the food from the Pale Man and then escape. I think that was her task.
Well, no, her task was to not touch any of the food. I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
well, it was something like that. Like she needed to bring something from there.
Got it.
But she doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that point because she a lot of the time she screws up, but that's not actually the point of all this stuff, as we'll see later.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like what she does and how she does it, like what choices she makes when she's at a certain crossroad.
Mm-hmm.
But then she tells the fawn like, "Oh, my mom's sick. Like I have to do something. I don't want to help you. I need to help her."
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, "Okay, fine. Then I'll give you a spell." So he gives her this mandrake root.
Mm-hmm.
That's shaped like a human, and she says, "Okay."
Well, that's a mandrake root. That's just they're shaped like fetuses. It's like a fantasy mythology thing. Yeah.
Yeah. He gives her the root, and he says, "Okay, put it in milk under her bed, and then feed it blood, and she'll get better
every once in a while." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her mother's condition does improve. And and if you're a child and you're doing this shit, and you have a fawn that speaks to you, and you have this crazy like vegetable looking thing under the bed, and your mom somehow all of a sudden magically improves, you're going to keep doing that thing. You're going to believe that the magic is real.
Yes. For sure. So she does it, and she gets better, which is good. And so then she decides, okay, now I'm going to do the next thing, which is open the doorway to the Pale Man's
lair.
Dining room or whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, we again talking about like everything is handcrafted and well designed up to this point, but like this is another one of those standout scenes. This is the scene that they put everywhere, that you see on like every streaming site, all the promotional stuff is in the lair here. I remember when this movie came out, there was a newspaper. You remember newspapers? In the newspaper, they had a section where they reviewed movies every week or like new releases, and I used to read those. And I remember seeing that this movie had come out. I didn't know anything about it, but the image, because they would have like one black and white image per movie that they were reviewing, was the Pale Man, with the hands, and that's just like one of those images that is just kind of like it's like this one and the fawn that is just like recognizable with this movie.
It's super iconic, and this scene is like so well done.
Yeah,
all of it
insane.
Yeah, all of it is just so cool. Like the ideas and like what it sort of represents and what it articulates without having to like really
without saying anything.
He's
got basically, it's like there's paintings all over the ceiling, right, of like him like impaling and eating all these children. There's like little tiny child-sized boots, just like a pile of them in the corner. Like there's just so much stuff when Ophelia's looking at this room that is just kind of like, oh shit.
It is extremely ominous.
Yeah.
Another really cool thing from the commentary track, like Guillermo talked about, he saw this film. He said one of the best experiences he had showing this film was he saw this film with Stephen King. And
wow.
Yeah, he said that when this scene came up, like it was really interesting experience, like seeing Stephen King watch this scene because he thought it was like so creepy and he was like squirming in his seat. I thought that was really cool.
Stephen King, the perpetual child torturer. That's very funny.
Yeah, the lover of dead children is another. Yeah, that's something they bond over. Is like, oh, how'd you kill the kid in this movie?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, extracting the child's pain. I like that.
So this scene, it's really cool. And another thing that Guillermo talked about is like, again, there's all these sort of there's a mirroring of the two storylines, and so like this scene with the Pale Man mirrors that scene with the banquet of all the people,
all the like political.
There's like
people.
The politicians, and there's like a freaking priest or something there.
Yeah. It's just all the people in power, basically.
Yeah, it's all the people in power, and this is like the reflection of that type of a scene, where the Pale Man represents.
And the main challenge of the scene for her was he has this great, huge feast banquet, but you can't eat anything. And I don't care how tempted you are. If you don't touch it, you just go and you do your job. But what does she do?
Yeah, she eats some grapes or something, and the pale man's like, "What? You took my food?" And then
he wakes up
like,
basically.
Yeah, he like his eyes are in his hands. It's crazy.
Well, he's got the sockets in his hands, and then once he like kind of animates, he sticks his eyeballs in his
hands, and then he can see. Yeah, and then he starts eating the fairies.
Yeah,
starts eating these other fairies.
And the funny thing about it too is like he's got all this food on the table, right? And it's an overwhelming amount of food, but he's the pale man. He's skinny. He's literally just dripping skin off of bone is how emaciated he is. And we see him, he can only basically, we assume, eat living things. And this is something that is also juxtaposed with the monster from The Devil's Backbone, if I remember correctly. There's a monster in that film that is like the opposite of the pale man. There's a really interesting parallel there. But yeah, he basically can only subsist off of like living things or the suffering of others. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really sort of an allegory for like super greedy people, like true avarice. It's like just just cannot have enough of feeding on other people or other suffering.
He clearly never gets fat, no matter how many child booties he has. Yeah,
he can never eat enough children. It's sick. It's a great scene. And so she, Ophelia breaks the rules. He wakes up. He comes after her, but then the fairies kind of save her, and then he starts eating the fairies.
Yeah, which is awesome. Just the way he crunches into those fairies.
Yeah, rips their head off.
Yeah, it's like a piece of celery or something.
Yeah, it's brutal. And then there's also there's like a time limit, and then the time runs out, and so she's like kind of struggling, so she has to like create another trapdoor on the ceiling.
Trapdoor, yeah.
Yeah, and so then she's able to get out right as the pale man's about to kill her.
Just classic horror suspense stuff.
Yeah, it's a great scene. It's like like you said, it's like the scene that gets plastered everywhere, gets talked about a lot. It's one of the best scenes in the movie for sure.
Yeah, one of the reference scenes for sure.
So then we get back to the B plot, which is more the stuff with there's all these anti-fascists are running these operations. So there's a scene where they derail a train, they like blow up a train. They go take out the train. And then
and we have to talk for a second about how when they're in the forest with the rebels, how gorgeous the cinematography is in all of these forests. I mean, I remember again when I saw this movie the first time, I was only concerned with like, this is gonna be a fucked up horror movie and it's gonna have gore in it and disgusting shit. And then we got to the toad and I was like, yes, this is it. But then like as it went on and it became more like I got more engrossed in the actual story. I was kind of really blown away. It was one of the first films that I really noticed the cinematography. I was just like, everything's got like a really consistent color tone, like Vidal's world where like Ophelia is very muted, and like blue or whatever. And then in the forest, it's like really lively and colorful. And there's just all kinds of like insects and stuff, like all kinds of life out there. It's really, really interesting. I just thought it looked gorgeous. And I've seen this movie a couple of times. There's one scene later on when Vidal is like assaulting the rebels that is just blows me away every time I see it cinematography wise. It's like the one tracking shot, I believe, that follows him where he's like shooting people or like his people are shooting. I don't remember exactly, but
there's like the battle, right?
Yeah,
I think that's sort of around this part of the film. They derail the train, then they see that there's the rebels have come down the hill, and so then they go to confront them. And this is that's another scene where it's sort of some story, some elements for Vidal. Like he's got the watch, and he's basically ready to die. Yeah, he's prepared. If he dies, he wants to die heroically in this fight,
and he wants to make sure that people know exactly the time where he dies.
Yeah, and so they're fighting these rebels, and he's like, shooting at them up the hill, and then they go up the hill and they're battling, and then they capture a couple of people, most of which are either dead or dying. Yeah, and there's a scene where there's a guy who's dying, and then he just shoots
him in the head like twice. It's just so brutal. The violence in this is so brutal because, again, I don't remember what movie we were talking about. It's not like over exaggerated or anything or played in a graphic way. It's just kind of like people dying. It's just like when he shoots the guy in the face, you don't see like his head explodes it explodes at the back of his head with blood or anything. No, it's just like bullets going into people, and it's like really kind of unnerving. It's unnerving how like. It's just like you can go from a life to being dead like that fast, and I think that scene in particular, the way that it's shot and the kind of swift, cold efficiency of Vidal as he's like mowing through these people is like really chilling.
It's very cold, especially because like the guy's kind of like trying to almost plead with him. Like he puts up his hand and then he just yeah, and he keeps pushing his hand away with his gun, and then he's like whatever. He shoots through the guy's hand into the guy's face. It's like,
oh, it's so good.
It just feels like
yeah, it's just dirty.
And then they find someone who's still alive enough for them to torture, and it's Mercedes' brother, I believe. Yeah, it's Mercedes' brother. It's Mercedes' brother. So they capture the brother, and then they're starting to torture the brother.
And I believe he goes to the doctor, right? And he's like, "Doctor, I need to fuck these people up." Like, or is that? Am I remembering that wrong? Because I know the doctor gets involved with the torturers at some point, or with the tortured.
They spend the night like so. Vidal kind of. There's another scene that happens later. Vidal finds antibiotics.
Yeah.
And so then he's on to the doctor. He's on to him. And that happens some around this. So like they messed this dude up really bad, the brother.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the doctor is basically like,
that's right. He euthanizes him.
He euthanizes. He's like, I can't. I'm gonna out myself. I can't let this happen.
Yeah.
And then he ends up dying in this really kind of poetic and beautiful moment.
Really, really cool. Yeah, a little over the top, like movie kind of death, where you're just like,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But it's poetic in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, he's given because it's raining too. It's raining.
Yeah, it's just like really, really. It's like the most movie death.
Yeah,
kind of
he slowly walks away. Movie. He gets shot, and he's like, oh.
Yeah,
and he keeps walking.
Exactly. Like unlike everybody else who just like gets bullet holes in their faces, or get like beat with the butt of a gun or whatever. He's just like gets his whole. He gets his like platoon, Willem Dafoe like death, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. The Willem Dafoe kind of like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And he had this really great line that I thought like kind of hit on the theme of the film, and like. The doctor. Like Vidal is sort of like, why'd you do this? He's like, it's something you can't understand. He says, obeying for the sake of obeying is something only you can do, Captain. And he's just like, I can't just obey and do fascism like you can. I can't do this to people, torture people, kill people, exterminate people, and just not resist. I have to. I'm not like you. And he dies for it, and he's willing to die for it. So.
I remember that line. Yeah, I remember being stuck on that line because it's like all encapsulated in one line. I remember the line exactly, but it was really good. Yeah. Yeah,
and again, it's very thematic of like what the film is about, and I really like that because like he again another thing that Guillermo talked about is like he saw this as another piece with Devil's Backbone, but what it was interesting was like he said he'd been going through the ideas and making the ideas sort of in the early 2000s. And he said that like after 9/11 happened, it made him really rethink a lot of what his ideas were about this. And I guess it sort of strengthened some of the darker stuff.
Yeah.
That had to do with what he felt this film could say thematically.
Yeah. Well, for the record, I don't believe there's a single piece of media released after 9/11 that wasn't, at least in the immediate 5 to 10 years, that was not affected in some way subconsciously by that event. And I think that's a very interesting point. I don't remember reading about that, but that makes a lot of sense to me because I've been going through a lot of like early 2000s stuff recently, like late 90s, early 2000s, and there's like a very specific point, like anything that comes out right at like in 2002 or like 2003 specifically, it's just like there's just like a shift in the kind of mood.
Yeah,
there's like a less playfulness overall. Yeah.
Well, I think just to talk about that real quick, I think that there was there was an interesting like late 90s kind of almost premonitions of stuff. Like in the 90s you had Independence Day, and then there was Armageddon and Deep Impact, and it's like all these there's always a disaster movie, but this was like,
but it was not like that, right? It wasn't like a force of nature or like an act of God or something, because there were a lot of those movies being made.
Yeah, Volcano
like
or that kind of shit,
or whatever the fuck. Yeah, this was just like very real and raw for people. And obviously,
yeah. So I thought it was always interesting just thinking about like how there was all this stuff out there of like do we want ourselves to get blown up? Like what?
I know. But then as soon as that happened, you know. Those disaster movies are a relic of like Armageddon or whatever. Like they're very specifically 90s, you know. I think Roland Emmerich got to make a few more because he just does.
Yeah, but 2012 and all this stuff
and all that shit. Yeah, day after tomorrow.
Day After Tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, but like for the most part, you know, I believe Hollywood shifted to the Taken kind of revenge thriller thing where we just like really wanted to get revenge on those bad people that did bad things to us. You know, they stole our daughters or they did this or that.
24 kind of stuff.
24. Oh, Jesus Christ.
24, 24 is just It's like porn for.
It is absolutely
for that type of genre. And again, it's like, what was the effect? The film I really think of was it's like 25th Hour. The Spike Lee movie.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that was the first one that really kind of addressed it visually. Like there's a shot in that film where Edward Norton's looking down and you see Ground Zero from some apartment. Yeah. And then there's like the Terrence Blanchard score booms in. Yeah. And it's like, whoa. Trauma. It's a trauma. It's always sort of depicted as a trauma. Like that whole movie is about a guy who kind of messed up in his life, and he's kind of got to pay, and there's literally like the ending of the movie is like there's a crossroad. Which way do you take? And they take the other road, and it's like it's very interesting.
Yeah, good pull on that. That I forgot about that shot specifically in the movie. And then he kind of did that again. He was kind of like right on the verge of doing that again with BlacKkKlansman when he showed the footage of the Unite the Right rally in 2017 or whatever. Like he's really I guess Spike Lee is just the guy who will go there.
Yeah, he'll go there. He will throw the trauma right in your face. Yeah. To sort of like try and contextualize the moment.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Really kind of capture it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, this is it, guys. This is it.
Like this is the moment in media and in the world that we're at. Yeah. Yeah. But that's very interesting because Pan's Labyrinth, I believe, like you could put this movie in a vault and you can show it in 1,000 years and it would be just as effective. I mean, granted, you got to know a little bit about the history in World War II and fascism and stuff like that. But like other than that, it kind of stands alone. It's like a perfect little piece. But I never thought about how like it was colored. The dark shades were just darkened a little bit by that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and almost like the way he talked about it was almost like it was almost like his worldview became less optimistic. Because again, fairy tales are sort of like this one's very dark, but it does sort of have an optimistic way of seeing the world at the end. If you believe that the fairy tale is true,
if you believe in the fairy tale,
exactly.
But you have to believe in it.
Yeah, but if you don't, then you could see it in a dark way, right? So it kind of goes both ways. But even for him, I guess he probably made things even darker, right?
Yeah, well, that explains why all of the scenes with Vidal are just so fucking oppressively depressing. Is that a way to put it?
Yeah, they're super brutal.
Yeah.
So then back to the plot. So then like we get this scene with like I think what happens is like Vidal finds the mandrake. And then he's like, what the hell is this? And he's like holding the fetus shaped plant or whatever.
Which to him is just a dumb looking plant, and Ophelia's over there losing her mind. Like, no, stop it. Like, this is the thing that's keeping my mother alive. Like, you need she believes this, and then what does he do? He tosses it in the fire.
Well, the mom intervenes and is like, I'll take care of it. And so then the mom kind of makes the choice of saying, oh no, this is all fake. You can't believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
And the mom throws it in the fire, and then she just dies. She basically dies. She gives birth to the son, but she dies. And then we get this montage where there's like the funeral, and then after the funeral, all this other stuff. And then this is great. Yeah, like in that scene when she throws in the fire, there's a great shot of like the thing as a fetus just like moving and dying. So
it kind of just like withers away in the fire. It like dies. Yeah.
Yeah, it just withers and dies in the fire, and then she dies shortly after.
It's the mother's life force. You got to believe in fairy tales.
Yeah, and again, it's like she doesn't believe, and so she winds up dying, unfortunately. And then so something happens with Mercedes, and she decides that she's going to try and escape. This probably has to do with like the brother getting killed or whatever, because she's probably knows she's going to get found out. She like has this really interesting meeting with Vidal, where he's kind of there's some sexual weird stuff, like he's kind of hitting on her.
There's got to be,
right.
You don't get to be the big man unless you try to take advantage of other people underneath you.
Yeah. And so he's kind of like hitting on her, but she's kind of telling that he knows a bit too much about her, because there's again another thing that mirrors in the story. He kind of knows that she has the key to the storage shed, because the rebels broke in and stole some like grenades and stuff. But he noticed that the key was not, like the lock was not forced; it was unlocked.
Yeah.
He's supposed to have the only key, but he kind of suspects that she has the key as well. It's like she has a duplicate that she's using to help the anti-fascist forces. And so at that point, Mercedes is like, okay, we got to go. And then she goes to Ophelia, and Ophelia decides to go with her. And then they're running, and they're in the forest, and then, it's all beautiful. And
which kind of makes sense, because like Ophelia at this point, her is it that her faith is shattered in the fantasy, right? Like after
and then the fawn kind of was like, you dummy, you messed up, like you failed,
like you did the. First of all, like you fucked up with the pale man, and then you got, like I told you that this was gonna work, and then look what you did. So like so like the fantasy is falling apart. The reality, her mom is dead, and she's stuck with Vidal, and she's like, I want out. Yeah, because that's her entire thing. That's her entire character, is just I want out, or rather, I need out. Yeah.
And so they get caught by Vidal and his forces or whatever, and they capture them, and he's like, so all this bad stuff is happening. This is like the low point of the film, right?
Yeah.
But then then they're gonna torture Mercedes the way they did the brother, and throughout the film we kind of get this interesting thing that she does. Like she has this small knife that she would always kind of kept on her person, and we saw her like wrap it into her skirt, and then they tie her up, and then again Vidal with his sort of arrogance,
this other guy playing around with her.
Well, also like he tells this guy's like, oh, do you want me to help you torture her? He's like, oh no, she's just a woman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And again, he's super arrogant, and he underestimates her. So she cuts her way free, and she stabs him like twice, stabs him in the back, and stabs him in the chest.
Gives him a little Joker makeover.
Yeah. You know how I got this these scars?
Literally, you know how I got this scar. Yeah. It was funny seeing that. Yeah.
So she rips him open. Because this is before The Dark Knight, right?
It was before, yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It'd be funny if he like said this story.
Oh, right.
Not totally. There's a lot of people that have these theories that he was like that the Joker in that film was basically a soldier in Iraq. I don't know if you've heard like those theories.
God, I hate that shit. I understand it though, because again, we were just talking about the movies made 5 to 10 years after 9/11. That would have made a lot of sense, because they were trying to make everything is like a soldier.
A messed up soldier.
PTSD. Jesus Christ. No, I didn't hear that theory.
Yeah, it's a very common theory. Anyway, so she rips him open, gives him the Joker face, and she runs away. and then meets up with the she gets freed by the anti-fascist forces because some of the other soldiers kind of come after her, but then the anti-fascists
the rebels,
the rebels, they come and they kill a whole bunch of the fascist guys, and so they now have a overwhelming force coming to supplant the people who are running the village. But meanwhile, so Ophelia is like basically gets one last.
She gets caught up in this shit again,
in the fantasy stuff again, and so what she got, what she got from the Pale Man was like this dagger, this really long dagger, and so the fawn has the dagger, and this is like great. Kind of weird foreshadowing, right? He's like got the dagger. He's like, "Oh, there's one last thing that you can do, and you have to do exactly what I say. Do exactly what I say, and then we'll be able to like make everything right again." And you're just like, "Dude, this is not gonna end well for her, right?" It just doesn't feel like it's gonna end well.
I love it because when he gives the final directive, which is just like just bring me your baby brother and we'll be fine. It makes you wonder like. Oh, now he's ready to let her back in, because before he was closed off. He was like, oh, you know what? You didn't listen to my rules. You fucking deal with it. And now that there's a baby at play, he's just like, oh, we're good. You know what? I've decided to give you a second chance. Like that's not sus at all.
Yeah, and so she does it. She like grabs her baby brother and she goes running to the labyrinth, and Vidal is like stalking after her. And this came like a little bit after we saw the scene where he like wired his mouth shut.
He's exactly. He like DIY'd his own Joker smile back together. He like stitches it. He like sews it back up basically.
Yeah, and this sort of has to do with his vanity. He's very vain about his appearance. Like, there's a lot of times where he's like redoing his hair.
He's looking in the mirror, he's shaving or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very vain, and so to do that to him really kind of takes something from him. Yeah. And this is the part where Guillermo kind of he says like this is where he transforms into this relentless sort of wolf character who's like going to go after Ophelia and cannot be stopped.
Yeah, and so this is when like all of his disguise has been kind of taken away from him, like step by step.
Yeah, the veneer, good-looking veneer. No, he's just a beast of a person. So he's like chasing after her while this battle's going on, and so he's singularly focused on basically killing her, right? Despite the fact that all of his forces are losing. So he follows her.
Well, killing her and getting his child back.
Yeah. So he follows her and he's like trying to find them. They go into the thing and he kind of gets lost because like there's a dead end in the labyrinth, but then it opens for her so that she can go into where the fawn is. But he gets lost for a little bit.
Yeah. Because he doesn't know all the okay. We can talk about it once we get to the very end, but like basically, he's never navigated. He doesn't know all the shortcuts or whatever, and she probably does because she spent so much time there. Yeah. Like whatever the story, right? Like whatever the magic you choose to believe in.
Yeah, however you want to interpret this story.
Yeah.
Is it real or is it a fantasy or is it just like the fantasy just in her head? So she gets to the middle and then the fawn's there and he, again, like I said at the beginning, now he looks really young.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh great, you brought him, and now we're going to take his blood and we're going to make everything right.
Yeah.
We need the blood of the innocent.
But the blood of the innocent. But to be fair, he puts it really nicely. He's just like, just a little pinprick, like you don't gotta hurt him too much. We just have to get some blood of the innocent.
Yeah, and it's like there's an even darker story where she's like believes him, and then he like, you can't really make, like, you could make a story, but I don't think you can ever make a movie where like, they do some really fucked up, like to slit the kid's throat or something, where he lies and then, like he literally kills the kid.
I'm sure you could, but the rest of the movie would have had to been different, be different. I think. I don't think you could just spring that on us at the end and for no reason, Well,
the movie's been pretty brutal.
It's been pretty brutal, but you were talking about like every character's got a thing, and Ophelia's thing is just like not harming the innocent.
Yeah, I mean this is made for her choice to prove herself, really, right?
Yeah, like in a sense, what I'm trying to say is like the Tenet thing of like what is, will be is like it is like she was always going to make that choice kind of a thing.
Yeah. And so she's like, no, I'm not going to give you my brother.
Yeah,
and he's like, okay. And then as Vidal is like walking up on him, it's like, okay, if you want to do that, you go ahead with it. And then he finds her, takes the child away, shoots her, and then just walks away.
Yeah,
and she falls down and she's dying, sort of the way we saw her at the beginning of the film. And then he walks out of the labyrinth, and then all of the rebels have completely taken over. They've won the battle, and then he has his final moment where he gives the child to Mercedes, and he's like, "Oh, tell the child my name." And they're like, "No,
tell him exactly the time that I died."
Yeah, all this other stuff. And he's like, "No, we're not going to do that." And shoot him in the head.
The child's not even going to know your name.
Yeah.
Which is just the ultimate blow to his character, right? Because his entire thing is about legacy and, again, the vanity and everything.
Yeah.
It's a great little send-off for our villain.
Yeah. It's a really great scene, too, because, like, they do this thing where, like, his eye, like, gets all messed up when he gets shot in the face. It's really subtle,
well, it's really,
well done.
Again, it's those realistic gunshot wounds where it's not just, like the Cronenberg, the head explodes or whatever. It's just it's really just, that's what people dying looks like.
Yeah. And then Mercedes, they go and they find Ophelia dying, and then we see in this last moment.
The dying scene, real quick. I've seen this movie 5 or 6 times. I get it. The first couple times I just cried every single time at the ending, but I still get emotional. There's a recurring theme of that lullaby that her mother sings to her, and that it's part of the score. And so in the scene at the very end, when Ophelia is dying or dead or whatever, and Mercedes is humming that theme, I get choked up every single time I see this movie. Even yesterday when I was going through it, the 4K version, I was just like, I've seen this. I know what happens, and I just like, it's just so cinematic. I don't know. It's just like such a movie thing, the way that it's. I don't know. I just like that scene a lot. It brings a lot of emotion out of me.
It's great, right? Yeah. I mean, it's such a.
I mean, it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing when you consider all of the different aspects of the story. That this child was pretty much always doomed, right? To live in this time period right now with these people. Like she was never going to have a good way out. But like, her life is cut short, and then you could say it's for the better because we get the little epilogue scene.
Yeah, so she returns to the underground realm where it's we see her dad, and we see her mom there, and we see the fawn there, and she's like, she's returned, and she's the princess again. And once she finally accepts that she's going back to be the princess there, she dies in the real world, as it were. Mm-hmm. And
I have to give a special shout out to the king. El Rey, the king of the underworld, her father in the fairy tale, played for the very last time in a Guillermo del Toro film by Federico Lupi, who was basically his guy. And so that's why I separate like all of the Spanish speaking films from the rest of the Hollywood stuff that he's made, because these films in particular have like a twice as strong of like a signature style to them. And this guy was in all of those movies. He played the lead in Kronos, and he also played one of the main characters in Devil's Backbone. So he was sick at the time, because I believe he died in 2009 or whatever, but they like green screened him and they put him in as the king at the very end of the movie. And he was like he's like a Argentinian actor, I believe, which was really well known, but he was like the guy that like Del Toro kept going back to. I believe he put him in Mimic. He had like a scene for him in there. Like they just love working together. And so I just thought it was really cool that like, his friend was not doing well. So he made him the king in the fairy tale.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's a beautiful movie, right?
Yeah.
And then we get this like final epilogue of like, oh, and then she, reigned for the rest of her life, and she was really just and good. And whenever you can see her sign on our realm, and it's like if it's a flower bloom and you see an insect, that means it's her.
You just have to know where to look, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's to know where to look. Yeah, and that's the film, right? It's amazing. It's an amazing movie. So I guess you want to talk about, okay, like did this happen or did it not? right? I guess that's sort of the debate, as it were.
It opens itself up to that, specifically because at the very end, when Vidal comes in when she's talking to the fawn and she's telling him, no, I'm not going to give you my brother. She's talking to the fawn, and then the fawn's like, okay. And then the very next shot, I believe, is Vidal coming up, and then from his side, there's no fawn there.
Yes.
So then you can say the fawn either vanished, in that split second, or and even the little shortcut that she takes in the labyrinth is just like, either this, is she seeing this stuff, or is this stuff really that hidden from the detached adults, the cold, nasty adult world, and only the childlike, because that's just a fairy tale thing, only the childlike wonder is able to manifest these things. You can look at it that way, or you can look at it in like a really cold, kind of realistic way, or cynical way, like I like to look at things, which is to say that it's a nice fairy tale that this girl's built up in her head for herself. What do you think?
Well, I'm sort of so I probably, the first time I saw it, I would have said that it probably was not happening. That would be sort of my feeling. That would probably be my first takeaway of the film.
Yeah.
I think that if you want to go the most objective route, the reading of it is that they do happen. I think that's the objective reading of it, based upon any interpretation that the people closest to the source material would say about the film. I think is that they do happen, but
they do happen. Yeah. No, of course,
the fantasy stuff does happen, and that she does really go on into this fantasy realm at the end. Yeah, and that the only reason, he does a lot of stuff to show that the two worlds are bleeding into each other. At first, they're very separate tracked, right?
Yes.
So there's the real world. It looks very cold. It looks very kind of bleak. It's not very colorful. And then the fantasy world is like very bright, very different. And then the two bleed into each other. And so I think that's one way of understanding why the two don't really interact at first. And I think it's just like all these adults, they're too busy in their adult world. They've put up these safeguards that don't allow them to understand these things. And it's only children can view and understand it because they don't have our inhibitions. So I think that would be the reading that Guillermo would have for the film.
I think because I've seen, again, I remember just either reading maybe like some stuff that was written about it, or it could have been one of the many things that was on the Criterion Blu-ray. I don't remember exactly, but I believe his like the way that he would like people to read this is to kind of make up their own minds. But I believe in his mind, it happens. It's real because she believes it's real, basically. I think that's kind of his whole point, is that these things, these fantastical things, if they're real to you and they help you get through a thing, then they're real and they happened, And so I don't know if there's like an objective. I mean, obviously within the fairy tale, then yes, it's a fairy tale and it all happens that way. But I think like the kind of the moral of it is that, I think.
Yeah, I feel like for him, obviously probably the biggest thing is to get the moral takeaway, right? Exactly, of the story.
Yeah.
And if the moral takeaway is enhanced by you thinking that it's just in her head, or it's enhanced by the fact that
exactly, it's whatever helps you. Like for me personally, it hits twice as hard if the way that I see it is that none of the fairy tale stuff happens at all in the real world or in any world. There is no fairy tale world. So for me, it hits like, that's why I get extra sad at that ending, because it's such a beautiful thing to have believed that, and to know that you're going into the, you're going to be with the king and be with your dad and everything. It's such a nice thought, even though knowing that it's really just, Mercedes is crying over your dead body kind of thing. Like that works for me. But for other people, you believe in the fairy tale, and that, that kind of hits you in that way. So yeah,
for sure. And it is good that it works either way.
I believe it. Right? I just think it works both ways, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah,
it definitely does work both ways. And that's kind of a testament to the film. It's like, it really is a fairy tale ending in kind of classical grim sense, you know?
No, exactly. He takes the fairy tales that are like fairy tales have always been grim and weird and fucked up. You just don't remember because when you read them as a kid, you're just like, Rumpelstiltskin. That's, what a crazy old man. It's like, no, he fucking eats children.
Yeah, eats kids. Well, we Disneyfied it, right? Like we're like Cinderella and all this other stuff. Like Americans are like fed the cute version and the fun version, when in reality all these things, their basis in the European mythology is messed up. And a lot of like the Ring Around the Posy stuff, which is about the plague, like all this stuff. We have no context of what it was actually about. Like it's actually horrific.
It's funny because for me, I didn't grow up with Disney movies. I don't think I've seen a single Disney movie until I was like maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I saw, I think, The Lion King and Hercules or something. Like I didn't grow up with that in that kind of Disney consumer culture thing. It was there, but I just didn't have access to it, I don't think, where I grew up. So when I came over here and I saw how just overly, like it's just high fructose corn syrup just being shot into everybody's brains, I thought it was a little weird because I remember reading those fairy tales when I was a kid, and I read like after that I read like the Victor Hugo books like Miserables and stuff like that, which were really big in Europe, and I was just like, yeah, man, kids are fucking like kids don't. Yeah. Like it's not like a pleasant world, to be a child in the adult world.
Or so, even like the Charles Dickens stuff, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like his stuff is just all about like poverty, children in poverty, children working and slaving. It's like it's bad. It's really bad, dude. It's really, really bad.
It's really
and here's some funny jokes, but it's bad.
Yeah. So I mean, you can make it either way, but I think you're right. Like we went a little too far in the direction of the Disney, I think as like a culture, as a society.
In America, I'm telling you, it is ubiquitous. It is just shoved down your throat. You're probably a vast majority of kids have seen like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, all this basically propaganda, right? This is propaganda that they feed into your head.
Well, they turned it into propaganda at some point, because I remember
it's marketing propaganda for them because they create this idea about the world. But for Disney, the end goal for them is to sell you more stuff, right?
Yep.
And what's funny is on the other side, like now what they're doing is the other side of the propaganda is the Marvel stuff. They feed that into your head, and so it's like, you're Spider-Man, buy this toy.
Right. Now it's not like Marvel wasn't doing that before, but now that Disney's got full control of it,
Marvel, like when they were in the comic book, they could never really do what Disney does with their marketing, like thing.
Yeah, that's a superpower. Yeah,
they had to niche market all these things. They did niche marketing where they said, okay, our demographic, our psychographic person is basically at first it was like a white teenage boy who's like 14 to 19 or something. That was basically who they were going for. Now when the Disneyfied version of that psychographic, it's like a 12-year-old to a 35-year-old maybe who in every demographic so it's not just a racial thing. Now it's across the board and it's everyone on the planet. And so now that's the new fairy tale they're feeding into people's brain. But for Disney, it's just to sell stuff. That's all they care about. Sell toys, sell movies, sell Disney Plus.
Imagine if Pan's Labyrinth, if you don't change anything about the movie, let's say in this world, but it is like it's not necessarily a Disney movie. Like who would put this out? Like if it was marketed in that way, if there were toys of the fawn and the fucking pale man everywhere,
you can Disneyfy this movie.
You could, right?
You can Disneyfy this movie, which is scary. I mean, things are different. But like I can just imagine. So first off, it's a musical, right? It's a freaking musical. So like the Pale Man scene is like it's like that, but the dude's singing and stuff, and he like puts his hands up and he's like singing this weird song, and then I
regret. I'm so sorry that I brought you down this path. I'm so sorry.
So at the end she won't die. She probably doesn't die. They do something else. Like, I don't know.
Different. Yeah.
She probably just disappears, right? So she says, "No, I'm not going to let him go."
Yeah.
And then the little thing, the doorway down opens to the underground. She goes down, and the baby's just left there by himself.
Yeah, and Vidal's just like, "What just happened?" And then the rebels come up behind him, and they're like, we got you."
And then there's like there's that post scene where it's like she's there and it's happy and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then the baby cries
because and the fawn comes in and he's like, that was the test. It was whether or not you would spill the blood of an innocent. Oh, I get it.
And then there's a song at the end, and then whatever. No, but you could Disney-fy it. It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Delete it.
Yeah.
Which it's funny though, because I wanted to talk a little bit about like you could Disney-fy it, and we talked about how strong it works as a fairy tale on its own because it is an original work. It borrows heavily from other things, but it is, it's like any kind of screenplay. It's just like a collage of like the director's experiences and influences and stuff. Well, in this case, the director. But I just think I wanted to just kind of make a point of how like much of an expert he is specifically at like story structure and like the fairy tale structure specifically. Like I said, like this is just a guy that reads a lot of fucking books. And so at this point, like, to be able to craft a story that holds up as well as any other fairy tale that we've read, that from throughout the last 500, 600, 700 years, of human existence, I think is amazing. And it's extra amazing that you could do that in the 2000s, even where everything's been done before. Everything's already been done. And he was able to craft this kind of new, not completely unique, but like a new fairy tale with new sets of characters that follows exactly the same beats as some of the old fairy tales, and it works on kind of every level. I think is really, really remarkable, and it just shows that it's someone that really, really understands narrative. And this is one of those things when I was going through his movies and going through his materials, where I was just like, that's why he is Guillermo del Toro and I am not. That's why he is who he is and other filmmakers are not, because it does take like a very, very a mind for this stuff to really understand story that well. Some other directors are really good. They're really good craftsmen. Like we talked about Christopher Nolan. Like he's an architect who will build you the thing and he'll get you to point A to point B. But Del Toro is just the guy who really likes to work the story, over and over.
Totally. And he, on the commentary track, he talked about how much he worked on it a lot. Like the beginning, he had a long process of figuring out what the opening of the film should be, and creating that juxtaposition of her of the reverse of her dying at the beginning, and then that sort of fairy tale about her, that sort of prescript to the postscript of her dying, and then sort of going back into the fantasy world and being the princess again. That stuff just like really works so well. Like the way that the film opens, and it just brings you into this story from the jump. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of time, right?
Exactly. And it takes, you just got to have a mind for it, because I feel like you could assign the basic beats of the story to a screenwriter or something, and you could get the movie, but it just wouldn't be as layered and as detailed, or and again, because he's also directing it, like it just feels really kind of handcrafted. It just feels like you're reading a story, honestly, like you're reading a book or something.
Also, the way that they use like the wipes. There's all these scenes like sort of in the middle of the film and later on where like there's a wipe from one scene to the next, and they deliberately did that to make it feel kind of storybookish, which is really cool.
Right. I remember that. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool movie.
Yeah. So I think, overall we love this film. This film's amazing. It's one of the best. This is a good year for film. This came out in 2006, right?
2006, yeah. Same year as Lady in the Water, by the way. You want to talk about fairy tales?
Yeah, I actually like that movie. I think that movie is defensible. It is. You have to forgive the fact that he is. So that film is the most
power.
That film is the most Shyamalan film. That film is pure Shyamalan. There's no film more Shyamalan than that film.
There's no filter.
And when you see that, when you see who he is, I think a lot of people rightfully are like, dude, you're an arrogant, crazy dude. Like he thinks like so much of himself.
Yeah, he's like Kanye West. He's just like, I am the best filmmaker ever.
Which makes him great as a director, because
you
don't want a director who's like, I don't know, well, I'm okay for what.
Right. I can do this, and this, and then I have some weaknesses here. It's like, no, I am the fucking master of suspense.
This guy, and he's like, he holds grudges, like, oh, you don't like my films? Well, I'm going to create an archetype of a character who I'm going to kill.
Yeah.
In this, I'm going to kill you, have my antagonist kill you in this movie, so that I can get, and it's just to pleasure himself, right?
Right, yeah.
Like,
it serves no purpose in the story or anything.
It serves no purpose in the story other than the gratification of himself seeing the avatar of his enemy being killed by his antagonist.
Yeah.
He casts himself as the most important writer of the 21st century in his own film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the arrogance level is off the charts. But when you get past that, it's like, it's very, like, he's so good at these sweet, very charming stories about people changing and coming into their own and understanding who they are in these moments. I just think about, I rewatched The Village recently.
Nice.
And The Village, like, William Hurt does an unbelievable job in that film.
I love that movie so much.
Like,
it's so underrated in my opinion.
There's a point in that film where, like, they send Bryce Dallas Howard off on her mission. Yeah. And they're like, they have this moment where they're like, is this going to destroy what we've built? Was this even worth it? And they're questioning everything. And you kind of like get this moment where you understand, like, these people, it wasn't easy for them to do what they did. And they did it because their life was really just messed up. And the trauma was so deep that they felt like they had to just leave human civilization and start over. And they were like, basically sending her off was like saying, was this right? It's almost like they put it into the hands of fate, having this blind girl run off when she has no idea about the world around her. There's something out there trying to kill her. And if fate has it within itself, she'll come back and save this person.
Exactly. And it's kind of in line with the way that they were operating under the fantasy anyways.
Yeah, it's all fantastical, and like that's what makes him good. That's what he's good at. But people get caught up in like the plot twists.
They get caught up in the plot twists, and that's and it's not entirely his fault. It's a lot of, it's a business. It's a lot of marketing. It's a lot of hype. It's a lot of like from the guy that killed Bruce Willis. Like there's a lot of that gets tied into it, but that's what happens when you take an auteur or like just specifically a writer director that is really good at one, like Guillermo del Toro, for example. It's remarkable in del Toro's case that he's able to, this is the stuff that he wants to do. This is the stuff that was on his head and on his mind, literary shit. And he ends up making Pacific Rim, right? It's remarkable that he's able to do both, because he's at the same time as he's excited by fairy tales, he's also really excited by anime. So that just happens to be a thing. But like, so they lucked out on that. Yeah, they lucked out on that. But like, Shyamalan is like, you can't really pigeonhole him within the studio system. I mean, you can get him to make like After Earth and try to make it like a vehicle for Will Smith. It's just like weird. It's just weird when they take someone who would do really great in the indie circuit. Like imagine if fucking Wes Anderson was doing, $150 million movies. Like it doesn't really, and that's why
pretty.
Sure, but you could argue Avatar: The Last Airbender has parts that are pretty, but that's like a worthless piece of shit movie.
Yeah, it's a worthless piece of shit.
But that's because they gave him $80 million or however much money to make. That's just not his wheelhouse, kind of a thing.
It's interesting because like he really got his name because he's a really good writer, and so he would write on spec stuff. Like they would have him write, like for instance, just randomly, he wrote Stuart Little, the movie.
Oh yes, I remember reading that.
Yeah, he wrote that. He's written some other stuff. Like he's a good writer. Like if you tell him, okay, here's what I need you to write. Here's the stuff. He'll create a good character-based sort of story around whatever the thing is that you're trying to do. And that comes out. That's what kind of comes out, because he always, like, you can tell he always is thinking in terms of character and like how characters kind of move and change in the story. So like I just think of Split. Split is just like the story of this girl who has a really dark, messed up past, and then he throws in this antagonist into it that is this split personality. And they meet in this axis where the thing about this, the antagonist is that it's looking for people who think they're perfect, but they're not. And then her weakness becomes her shield that protects her from being harmed. So yeah, that's like his thing. It's like, it's always how do these character flaws play out to make someone put into the perfect situation where their flaw is their strength.
Yeah. It's just weird when they get caught up in the Hollywood machine, you know, like I remember all of the marketing for The Happening was just like M. Night Shyamalan's R-rated movie, fucking twists everywhere. It's like it's like, what's happening? I don't know. The Happening, you know, it's just like they got so caught up in the media marketing and everything that he does work a lot better on a smaller budget when you just give him you let him just do his thing.
Yeah, he's a guy. I think he's a guy you got to rein in. I watched The Happening again recently. that movie is so much worse than I remember it. That movie is god awful.
I haven't seen it since like 2009.
What's funny too is it's actually like a good film to watch for like if I was going to make a list of films that are pertinent to like the pandemic, like the COVID pandemic, that's a perfect film. Like it
gives you that vibe, yeah.
Because it's literally like the plants exert this thing that makes people commit suicide, and so everyone has to social distance.
Yeah.
And so the whole movie is basically people socially distancing. Like it's when too many people get together, the plants and the trees cause people to kill themselves. So and so they literally just have to go off and be by themselves, and they go the most rural, random places they can. But the film is just terrible. It's terrible. The plot is terrible. The characters are terrible.
But that's the thing, is it's like that's more of a concept. That's more of an idea, right? The plants are killing people versus, you know, Signs or something where it's just like, it's really aliens, yes, but really it's about the Joaquin Phoenix character, right? Like, will he learn how to, it's about the pastor, obviously, just like it's about his faith, right? So you always have to tie it back to something, you know, like The Village is the same. It's just like the faith and the fantasy they created type of thing. But when you give them full reign and you're just like, you know, make a movie that has a lot of like a big concept or like a lot of twists, like After Earth. It's just like, what if Will Smith, but in the future and no one else? Like, it doesn't really work.
He really needs to be reined. I don't even think that stuff was totally his fault. Like the After Earth, I think that was like a paycheck movie, and he just did it. Yeah, and it was a disaster because the whole movie was. Like those are the ones you gotta just say no.
Well, it's a paycheck movie that he did, but like look how irreparably it harmed his career for like 10 years because he still put his name on it. He still wrote the damn thing. So it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But like, I understand, again, you get caught up in the machine, and I think Del Toro is done a good job of kind of navigating that. Saying yes and no to certain things. He's had a lot of heartbreak because he didn't get to make like Mountains of Madness, you know, a Lovecraft movie. Like, he didn't get to do some of his passion projects, some of his more literary stuff. He didn't get to make another Hellboy, you know, like he had a lot of things that he had to kind of just accept that he's never going to make.
I saw something recently. He posted on Twitter, I think it was, a list of films where he had completed the script and done like storyboarding and everything that he didn't. So like, for instance, he was supposed to do The Hobbit, right? The Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
And I think he even got credit for the screenplay for a bunch of them.
I think he did, yeah.
And basically none of those happened. Yeah, he was supposed to do Halo.
Yeah.
He was supposed to do Hellboy 3. That was another thing that was supposed to be like a huge movie. They were like, nope, we're not going to give you money for it.
Yeah.
Van Helsing movie, The Haunted Mansion, do a remake. Frankenstein. Oh yeah, they wanted him to do a DC movie, like do Justice League Dark.
Justice League, yeah.
And that got killed. So he's got a ton of stuff that just fell through. A ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
And I'm really, like, it was really cathartic for me to see that after Hellboy died, you know, he made Pacific Rim, which was kind of like his redemption, but like, even in terms of the big budget shit, like Pacific Rim didn't make a lot of money. So it just like, it was so cathartic for me after all, and then he got involved with the Hobbit, and like none of that shit came to pass. So it was so nice for him for me to see him make like a $20 million movie like Shape of Water that is so like paintbrush Del Toro style, and get all the acclaim that it did. That was really cathartic for me, because it was just like sometimes you just rein it in and just go back to your roots. Kind of, it feels that the tone and the scale of that movie feels very much in line to Pan's Labyrinth and Devil's Backbone and Kronos, as opposed to like them trying to get him to be like the next big thing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. The Hollywood thing could be a trap, right? Like
for a lot of these guys, yeah.
You can get sucked in, and then it's like, I mean, how many years did this guy spend on stuff that he never did, right?
I think he spent probably as much time conceptualizing and developing and writing and storyboarding things than he actually did making these movies.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure it's like a 50-50 split, but that's just that's just the way it crumbles sometimes.
Yeah, and like, especially when it comes to something like doing The Hobbit, like The Hobbit's got to feel...
Christ. Oh, and there's so much like source material, not only in the book, because the book is not that, dense, but like if you're going to fuck around in Middle Earth, then you've got all that stuff to deal with.
You got a huge amount, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and at the same time, it's like, you kind of know that, like, they've got to know that Peter Jackson was going to direct those movies. It just had to feel like it was going to happen.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. And then it just feels like, okay, why did I get into this if I knew he was going to do it anyway? And, I don't know. It's a little frustrating.
Yeah. But, yeah. It's... This is one of those movies that came out exactly as it should.
It should, yeah. And so, coming up, he's got some other films. I forget what it was called. It was like something Alley, like Nightmare Alley is a film that's coming out. And it's got a good cast from what I remember. And then supposedly he's going to do his own take on Pinocchio. So
don't do that. Don't give me hope.
Maybe it'll happen. That could you imagine if he did a rated R Pinocchio like this movie?
That's what I'm hoping it'll be. That's what I'm really hoping.
I don't know if it'll be rated R, but like if he did, does it need to be rated R? Does it need to be?
In my mind, everything.
You can push the boundary. I think you can push the boundary, but I don't think you need to like have what real brutality and violence.
Okay, fair.
And gorishness.
No, you don't have to. No, but you know how the MPAA works. They rated the King's Speech R for language. Like, they have these very strange rules about like fucks and shits. So like you get a quota. No, I understand. I know how that works, but I'm just saying, like, if they like The Conjuring is another example where they couldn't give us they didn't have a descriptor for why they gave it an R. They just told him it needs to be an R because it was too fucking scary for us, basically. So there are things that like there may be some visual stuff. There's like maybe too grotesque, or maybe it brings up something subconsciously that the MPAA might be like, ooh, I don't know, that seems like an R. So I'm hoping that it doesn't get too sanded down by that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I do too. I feel like a lot of the time, because I remember there was some discussions back in the day. This was like the mid 2000s, and it was like I forget what it was. It was the Shia LaBeouf remake of Rear Window. The MPAA supposedly. Okay. Yeah, the MPAA supposedly gave that an R, and then Steven Spielberg just walked in and told him it's not an R. They basically changed the rating.
It's really arbitrary sometimes.
I feel like it is arbitrary. I feel like sometimes if you have the right person in the room with them, they'll be swayed.
Yeah, like I'm super down for a PG-13 Pinocchio that is as fucked up as what the MPAA thinks an R Pinocchio looks like. Like, I just don't want it to come out and be like super, super glossy. You know, who's is it? Okay. Is it is a production company Disney on this thing? Because then we're fucked.
Yeah, then we would be fucked. Do you want to check?
I'm checking right now.
Okay.
Oh, it's a Netflix thing.
Okay, if it's a Netflix thing, then it could be.
It's a Netflix thing, yeah.
It could be TVMA.
It sucks that I'll have to watch it at half bit rate and it'll not look as good as fucking the Pan's Labyrinth.
Man, the bit rate, they're gonna throttle it down so bad. It's like,
oh, and I guess we could talk about that briefly at the end. About the different transfers of Pan's Labyrinth. There's three ways you can watch this movie. in the States. There's the WB Blu-ray that came out in 2007. There's a Criterion Blu-ray that came out in 2018, I think. 2017, one of those. And then there's the 4K UHD version that WB put out like a year ago or whatever. I've seen all of them. And you know what's funny is, as much as I like the added clarity of the 4K one, I still think the Criterion Blu-ray is just a little preferable. They did something. They went back. They went to both Guillermo's, Navarro, the cinematographer, and Del Toro, and they did a new color grading pass on it. And there's just something about it that I feel like the Criterion Blu-ray pops more than the other two. The other two feel more like they're just transfers, like film transfers. And the 4K one obviously is gorgeous. And it's really, but it's not like, I don't know, it just doesn't pop in the same way that the Criterion one does.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, Criterion, they really go above and beyond.
Obsess over that stuff. The only thing that I could say about the Criterion one is that there's just not enough bit rate on the disc. So like there are some things in the like super, super dark scenes that like there's some things that like get crunched a little bit. But other than that, I'd say that's the way to go for this one.
Yeah.
If you can manage it, otherwise just fucking rent it on Amazon or whatever.
And this has got a lot of good special features too. I feel like a lot of his films have great special features.
They do.
Again, talking about Blade 2, there's just so much stuff, right?
It just took me so goddamn long to get through his filmography. I would watch one movie and then spend the rest of the week digging through the archives.
Yeah. And check that stuff out. Listen to the commentary track. He's got
very
a lot
entertaining.
of stuff to say.
He's such an interesting, entertaining guy to listen to.
Yeah, he talked about how much he hates cows and horses on the commentary track. Said he hates them, hates working with horses. Called them motherfuckers. And he said that one of the horses tried to stomp some guy's pelvis out, almost killed him. One of the actors.
Making movies.
Yeah, and he said, God forbid if I ever do a Western movie, you'll know that I'm really sad and having to deal with horses. Yeah,
that's funny.
So maybe he'll do like the first Western where there's like no horses, right? Like
I'm down. Everybody just rides frogs.
Yeah. Or they just walk. They don't even have a horse. It's like, oh, the horses are all dead in town.
Oh, so walk. Like The Happening, but for horses.
Well, he would have some what would be his spin on it? It'd be some fantasy. It would be he'd be perfect for. There's a character, there's a DC character, I forget the name of it. Oh yeah, Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex.
Oh,
they did a disaster. Oh my god, they did a disastrous movie with what's his name, Josh Brolin and
Megan Fox.
Disastrous movie. But he would be great for Jonah Hex, actually.
Absolutely, I forgot about that. Jonah Hex is one of the movies I have. There's not many. There's like maybe 10 movies I've ever seen in my life that are just I can't watch them. Like I can't finish them. I cannot watch these movies. I just can't. Like it makes me crawl out of my skin. I need to run away. Jonah Hex was one of those movies I couldn't finish. I couldn't watch it. Wrath of the Titans, I believe, was another one. G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra. Like there's a specific subset of these hyper polished studio shitfests that I just jump out of my skin. I cannot watch them. And you reminded me of Jonah Hex. That was one of them.
Yeah, the best part of Jonah Hex, I believe, what's his name is in it. Oh man, I'm forgetting. I totally forget the guy who played Magneto in the new versions of the movies.
Fassbender?
Yeah, Fassbender. I believe Fassbender is in that movie for a very brief.
Wow.
He is amazing. Yeah, I believe Fassbender is in it. He is amazing. Like just a crazy. He plays this crazy Irish guy, like some Irish guy you brought over, and he's totally nuts and will kill people with like daggers and knives. He's unbelievable. He's in it for funny. He's in it for like 5 minutes. He's the best part of that movie. Not even close. Not even close.
That's funny.
Not worth watching the movie for.
Minutes. Hell no.
Yeah, if you watch the fight. He is so crazy. Oh my god, it's amazing. He's amazing in that movie.
That's hilarious.
But yeah,
remember when John Carter showed up in X-Men Origins Wolverine to play Gambit?
Yeah, no good.
No good.
No good. But I mean, the X-Men stuff is just very hit or miss. Wolverine. They got the right actor from the jump, and he totally was iconic in the role.
And they got the right actor, and then it took them. Eventually, they paired him up with a good enough Hollywood director to make that work.
What's funny too is he made the he also made the one where he went to Japan, which is like kind of okay.
Yeah. Well, it's
That
kind of
was-
okay until you watch the unrated version. Then it's like really okay.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
It's really, really okay. It's like the R-rated version. They added in a ton of blood and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then they let him really do his thing, and he made a great fucking movie in Logan, right? But yeah, like I feel like they got the right Professor X and Magneto both times. But then they strapped themselves with J-Law, and she booked out on that. Like she got too big for it, like immediately. She was like,
It's
"No,
funny. It's great. It's fun. J-Law is going to be another. She's going to be another Adrian Brody. I feel like. I mean, maybe not. It's not true because she's a woman and she's always going to be like doing fucking like perfume ads or whatever. But like J-Law is peaked way too young. I think peaked way too early because I don't know how many more big budget movies she's got in her before the industry's just sick of her.
yeah, I feel the same way. Speaking of which, I saw this really great. I just came up in my feed on Reddit. Someone like speaking of like how J-Law just like hated the character. Like it was showing what they had to do the practical effects for the Rebecca Romaine version of the character.
Oh Jesus Christ!
And there's like a 45-minute documentary on that, and it's on YouTube. It's like, wow.
I remember that. I remember, reading about how just like torturous that was.
Yeah, but look, it has an effect. It makes us feel differently about seeing a person who looks like that, and it's not some fake CGI, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm all for it if if the artists are for it.
Yeah, she just. J-Law was not down for it. Just not gonna do it.
Well, J-Law has an Oscar, man. Like, what was she like? A fucking. Why am I playing around with these like in this kids? With these kids' toys. I can go out there and play with the big boys if they'll have me, right? And it looks like they're not having her right now.
Who's the guy that she works with a lot? There's the guy. Remember the one? I think this was the one where
David O. Russell.
David O. Russell. She's like, yeah, I want to be in a David O. Russell film.
Yeah.
She just like
she did one too many of those, and then that's it.
Because they're doing another movie too. I think they're doing another movie together.
Oh, are they?
I believe so. Yeah,
that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, she's like this other crap, like these big studio things. I want to do this other stuff.
Right.
Like whoever. I don't know who directed the Sparrow movie, the Red Sparrow. Like
it was. I think was that Francis Lawrence. I think it was one of the Hunger Games guys. Yeah,
Francis Lawrence. Another
guy.
Another one of her homies.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to have homies in Hollywood. That's how it works.
It's so true.
I mean, that's
so true.
That is how it works.
Yeah.
And if your homies happen to be making $150 million movies, then hey, good for you.
Yeah. That's how you make it, right?
Yeah.
And as long as you don't do anything uncouth, you don't break the bank. Well, you can probably break the bank as long as you have but if you do it like 3 times, then no matter what, you get exiled.
No matter what. Yeah. It's really brutal. Like going through, watching I tend to really stick. Like recently, I've just been watching a lot of '90s and 2000s movies. Like it's really fascinating to just see the kind of the churning of like, not even just actors, like the directors that were working. Like Rob Cohen fucking starts the Fast and the Furious franchise. Like he starts that shit, and then Triple X, and then his career ends at The Mummy 3 because he made The Mummy 3. Like it's just how that works. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And thinking of like the Twilight movie, I saw something about, it was just Kristen Hardwick who directed the first movie, and she was talking about her process of like how she prepares for directing of films, and she has like all these charts and stuff, and it's very meticulous, like the type of pre-production work she does. And they fucking kicked her ass off of that immediately.
Yeah.
That like she makes that movie work.
Right.
Makes the intimate, like the actual, and it was funny hearing her talk about it. Like she plotted out the entire relationship arc of the film. Of where the two of them are at every moment. And it's like she had like a map, and she'd be like, okay, so at this point in the film, you guys have never even touched. So think of that in terms of your sexual tension with each other. And at this point, because you're shooting out of order, right? So it kind of makes sense that you have to be very aware.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they fucking kicked her ass off, and they got some, I forget who, but it was like a Hollywood guy, right?
It was a Hollywood guy,
Doubled the budget, kicked her off, got someone else on. And it's like, you got to know people in order to be the guy who gets put on, right?
And
These big projects.
Yeah, and it kind of ties to what we were talking about. Like, you can have like you can't be too artiste in Hollywood if you want to remain to play at that level. You got to be a little detached. That's why Del Toro is really kind of went back and forth there, because he's just he can really only do the things that he's really passionate about. He doesn't care. Like, I believe Blade 2 was like he got to put a lot of himself into it, but ultimately it was a miserable experience for him because it was very, very, very like just Hollywood. Mimic was another one where it's like they pretended to let him do his thing and tell his story, and then they completely ripped it away from him.
Yeah, that was the Weinstein one, right?
That was the Weinstein one. Yeah,
they shafted him. And so
that was
hard.
That was the one where James Cameron punched Harvey Weinstein in the face at the Oscars over. Have you heard that story? It was the Oscars. It was the '98 Oscars, and Titanic was up for everything. And James Cameron knew about what they did to Del Toro over Mimic, and they got into an altercation, I believe, somehow. This is a story. You can look it up. I'm not making this shit up. I don't remember the details, but ultimately it ends with James Cameron punching Harvey Weinstein in the face, and it has to do with Mimic. Yeah.
What a guy.
What a guy,
right?
I mean, if you're the guy at that year's Oscars with Titanic, you can punch a producer in the face.
Well, not only that, but like, I mean, everyone knows that these guys are scum, right? Like the Weinsteins, like everyone knew that they were the scum of the earth, or Harvey or whatever in particular.
Harvey
knew the scum of the earth, but they have so much power that they're untouchable.
Yeah.
And so that was a moment where like someone who was equally powerful,
equally untouchable. Exactly. Yeah. It's like watching two made guys in the mafia fucking fight it out.
Well, it's like that scene in Goodfellas where they're like he comes in and he's like, "Hey, where's your fucking shine box?" And he's like, "Oh, okay."
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'll wait for everyone to leave, and I'm gonna fucking stomp you out. And they're like these two guys who are not made, and they had to pay for it, but they fucking stomped them out, stabbed them in the back of the trunk. Buried his ass. They buried his ass twice, by the way.
Yep. Yeah, they did.
Hey, remember that thing the thing we did upstate? Well, we got to go get the body.
I love it. On top of all of the movies I've been watching, I'm still watching The Sopranos, and I'm constantly just blown away at like how the mafia shit like works. It's so fun. Well, fun as a viewer.
Yeah, seeing it from the outside, not like engaging with it anymore.
No, Jesus Christ, that's like the most miserable lifestyle you could.
Well, it's basically over.
I know.
Like in the '90s, they basically destroyed the mob.
Yeah,
pretty much. And now it's just some guys who work with unions or whatever. It's not really a thing anymore.
That's why the TikTok stars with their streamer houses, they're gonna bring it back. They're gonna bring back the mob.
Oh my god! All right, guys. Yeah, so that will be our review for today for Pan's Labyrinth.
It's absolutely If you're a Halloween person and you watch,
watch this
spooky movies. This is it, man.
Watch this movie.
Yeah,
especially if you haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. So speaking of great films, so next week we're gonna do it. We're gonna get started.
Oh shit!
Got to get your list ready, man. Our top 100. We're gonna get started. We're gonna do number 100 to number 91. So we're gonna do our first the bottom 10 films, and we're gonna go 10 by 10 until we're done.
This list is not gonna make any sense, man. There's gonna be movies that are forgotten, that are moved and shuffled around, but I'm excited to do it regardless.
Well, I love that. Let's just throw stuff out there.
Exactly.
I want to see new stuff, different stuff.
There's going to be stuff that I remember when we get to like the 30s that I would have put at like number 88. And I'm just like, it's in the 30s.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Cool. So that's the thing to look forward to for the rest of this coming month. And I think the other thing too, the next big film, we're going to review Mank whenever it comes out. I don't know.
Yes. Oh, geez. That would be sweet.
But that's going to be a really exciting one to talk about.
Yeah. Very interesting. December 4th, it says.
December 4th. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I can't wait. The buzz has been really good on it too.
Great.
So yeah, thanks a lot, everybody. Glad you got a chance to listen to us again today, and see you guys again in the future.
See ya.